Hello, this is Ben Anderton, and I'm standing on what is known as the Paoli battlefield, also called the Paoli Massacre, which took place the night of September 20th and into the morning of September 21st, 1777. This site is located in what's now Malvern Township in Pennsylvania, west of Philadelphia, and they've kept the grounds pretty much the same way they were at the time of the battle. This is now an open field. At the time, it was an open farm field. They've tried to reconstruct these fences and the boundaries to match what the dimensions were at the time of the battle. Now, this battle was pretty unique because it took place at night. It was right around midnight when the first action took place, and the British, it was about 2,000 Continental soldiers that were camped here under the command of General Anthony Wayne. Now, right behind me is a signpost, and that is about the center of the camp. So it was all around this field where the Continentals were encamped. And they didn't have tents with them. They had built what they called wigwams out of thatch or sticks. And so this whole field was full of wigwams where soldiers were kind of sleeping under, basically little lean-to type shelters. Now the British, they had intercepted some communication from Washington, from General Washington to General Wayne, and it told them exactly where Wayne was. So General Howe sent Major General Charles Gray with about 1,500 British regulars to come and do a surprise attack at night upon this encampment. They would have come from this direction, which is kind of like northeast of where we are right here. And there were pickets that Wayne had set out. The pickets did fire on the British as they were coming. So it gave the Continentals a little bit of time to form ranks and start getting cannon hooked up to the horses and things of that nature. But you can imagine at midnight, waking up, they didn't have street lights around back then. This was just a farm field, hardly any buildings around here. It would have been pretty chaotic. Now, General Gray of the British had actually told his soldiers to remove the flints from their muskets and just fix bayonets and use swords. So that's how the British attacked the Continentals in this field. They came rushing at them. And that's why it became known as a massacre, not just a battlefield. In many ways, it can be compared to Braddock's defeat in the French and Indian War, where the British had never seen this type of warfare, and they didn't know how to react. In the same way, no one had really done this before. An attack at night without even use of firearms, just using bayonets and swords, hadn't been done really since firearms had been created. So, needless to say, there was a lot of bloodshed here. In total, 53 Continental soldiers, at least 53 were killed, and almost 300 total casualties, prisoners, wounded, and killed from the Continentals. The British lost 4 soldiers to death and 7 were wounded. So there hardly any casualties for the British. It was a very decisive victory, and it drove General Wayne back. And 6 days later, Philadelphia fell into British hands because all of the Continental forces at that time had peeled back from protecting Philadelphia. Now, we might think, why did this seem to happen so easily? General Washington had sent General Wayne some dispatches basically telling him, hey, you're on your own. And General Wayne was waiting for reinforcements. He was waiting to hook up with some other parts of the Continental Army. That never happened, and Wayne never heard about it. Those dispatches were captured, and so the British Army knew exactly where Wayne was encamped, and they knew how long he was going to be here, how long he had been here. They knew what his plan was because Washington had sent him to try to attack the baggage train of the British Army. So Wayne, when he was camped here, was within just 3 or 4 miles of the British Army, very close, and he was trying to be as secretive as possible. So the British captured these dispatches, so they knew where he was. They also supposedly had a spy, a local spy, lead them right to the encampment. So they came in here. It was a complete surprise. Like I said, the pickets that were set out had some time, fired some shots, and gave a little bit of warning, but certainly they didn't know a whole army was coming at them. So it was about 2,000 Continentals, about 1,500 British that met here on this field. Now, behind me, down toward the corner here, where it slopes off, it used to be, it still kind of is swampy. There's like a little runoff drainage creek down there. It used to be more of a swamp. And there's a story that was told by one of the Continental soldiers who said that he ran down in there and he just got in the swamp. Now, this was September, so it wasn't terribly cold, but it wouldn't have been really warm either. And he stayed there just with his head above the water and didn't move or make any noise. And when he woke up the next morning, when the light came up, he saw that there were a couple of 100 Continental soldiers in the swamp with them, all of them staying perfectly quiet and calm, just waiting for the British to leave, because they had no idea where they were or where they had gone. Now, this battle had an amazing impact upon the rest of the war. Number one, locals, many people throughout the colonies that may have been lukewarm about the cause of independence quickly heard about this massacre and started changing their mind. They were like, you know what, this was barbaric, and I can't believe the British would do this. Many stories were told. One Continental soldier gave a testimony that a doctor that was checking out the bodies that were on the grounds afterward discovered 46 separate bayonet and sword wounds in one soldier's body. Now, you have to remember it was dark, and it's tough to know if there's bodies on the ground and different soldiers as they're running through. The British soldiers are all just stabbing what they see, or if they really stood over soldiers that had surrendered or were already killed and just kept stabbing them. It's really tough to determine that. But at any rate, from a level of what we would maybe call propaganda, it really boosted the American cause, the Continental cause. So many people that were lukewarm kind of turned toward the side of independence from British based on this. Now, General Wayne, at that time, he was not known as Mad Anthony Wayne. That would come almost 2 years later, and he learned from this battle, and he actually turned it around for a much bigger, more impactful battle almost 2 years later at Stony Point, New York, along the Hudson, when he scaled the parapets there and took over that fort, really, from the British at bayonet point. He did it secretly and quietly, and it was a decisive victory once again for the Americans in that regard. Again, the British had no idea. They were not expecting that type of engagement from the enemy. So after that battle at Stony Point is when General Wayne became known as General Mad Anthony Wayne. So this battle was the last part, really, of what was the defense of Philadelphia. Brandywine, which is a much more popular and well-known battle location, Brandywine is a little bit southwest of here. I say a little bit, it's probably actually about 20 miles. And then Valley Forge, obviously, is another very well-known revolutionary site. That is just a little bit northeast. So if you ever want to visit Paoli Battlefield, Paoli Massacre, just know that there's many other well-known historical locations right around this same area. So this battle really, again, it had major impact on the war. It's also known as the first rallying cry from American soldiers. We've all heard, like, remember the Alamo, or in more modern era, remember 9/11. Well, this was the first one. It was shouted, remember Paoli, where throughout the Continental armies, and particularly General Wayne's troops, who had survived this and come through it, it was much more close to them. For them, it meant a lot. So when they were charging Stony Point, they were yelling, "Remember Paoli." That was a war cry. So this place it's really just an amazing piece of history. It's about a 40-acre site that's here, and again, they've put the fences up just about where they would have been during the battle. They've tried to reconstruct the boundaries. The tree lines are all basically the same. Obviously, they're different trees, but the boundaries themselves are the same as what they would have been back in 1777. There's also, this is the second oldest war memorial in the United States. The only one that's older is at Lexington, where the first shots of the war were fired in Massachusetts. This one was dedicated in, I believe, 1817, and it's set atop of, the war memorial itself is set atop of a mass grave of 53 Continental soldiers who were found in this field after the battle. They were all buried there in one grave, and had all of their jackets and equipment buried with them. So it's a very special place that had an amazing impact on the war for independence.